I have seen wounds that do not bleed, yet they cut deeper than knives. They are the wounds of being cast aside, told without words, "You are not wanted." Rejection does not simply hurt, it rewires. My friend Naomi Eisenberger showed that the brain lights up in pain when excluded, as if burned. And here lies the trap. The child learns that kindness does not bring safety. He learns instead that only masks protect. Some become dazzling to demand admiration. Others learn to calculate, to manipulate. Some grow so numb they feel nothing at all. Do you see the confession? Behind every narcissist is a child who was unseen. Behind every manipulator is a child who was betrayed. Behind every cold one is a child who decided feeling was too dangerous. This is the guilty verdict of rejection. It twists the compass of the soul until survival itself becomes darkness. And yet survival it is. The question remains, will you wear the mask or dare to live without it? They told you once that wounds of the body heal, while wounds of the spirit remain unseen. Yet I tell you, the deepest wounds are those that come not from fists or fire but from silence, from exclusion, from the cold glance that says, "You are not wanted here." If you seek to understand why certain souls grow hard, cunning, or ruthless, do not look first to wealth or destiny. Look to rejection. Look to the early days when the hunger for belonging was met not with bread but with stone. This is my promise to you. Today you will see how early social rejection sculpts the dark contours of personality. You will see why the child pushed aside at the table, mocked in the schoolyard, or ignored by parents may one day become the manipulator, the deceiver, or the mask wearer. Not by nature's cruelty, but by the logic of survival. You will see why rejection is not a passing inconvenience but the very forge in which dark traits are hammered. From the very beginning, human life is tied to others. The infant does not survive without the embrace, the voice, the watchful presence. Belonging is not luxury, it is breath. To be excluded, then, is to suffocate slowly. Modern science confirms what I already sensed. Rejection activates the same circuits of pain in the brain as a burn upon the skin. My friend Naomi Eisenberger demonstrated this through her careful studies. Even a simple game of exclusion caused the brain to light up as though struck with physical injury. Pain of the body and pain of rejection are kin. But the child cannot bear pain forever. He adapts. He creates defenses. Some become masks of pride, some strategies of manipulation, some armors of indifference. These defenses, repeated and refined, become personality itself. And here we encounter the beginning of what psychologists have named the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. Imagine, if you will, the small boy excluded from his classmates. At first he strives to please. He laughs louder, he offers gifts, he obeys rules. But rejection persists. Slowly, he ceases to believe that kindness brings acceptance. Instead, he learns that control may substitute for love. He watches who commands attention and begins to imitate them. He learns that to dominate is safer than to depend. What began as longing turns into calculation. This pattern has been observed across decades of study. The Dunedin longitudinal research in New Zealand traced children into adulthood and saw the same truth. Those who faced chronic rejection displayed aggression, mistrust, and emotional detachment. They were more likely to wear the traits of manipulation and coldness. It was not accident, it was adaptation. I once said that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But when a child why, the longing to belong, is denied, he seeks a darker why. Sometimes it is power, sometimes deception, sometimes the refusal to feel. This is how rejection twists the compass of life. Why does rejection wound more than hunger or hardship? Because for the tribe, to be cast out was to die. In the savannas of our ancestors, a lone man without the group perished quickly. Thus nature etched belonging into our bones. Rejection strikes the same terror as death. My friend Sigmund Freud explained how the ego, when unmet in its needs, invents defenses. withdrawal, projection, repression. What we call narcissism, manipulation, or psychopathy are not random sicknesses. They are defenses crystallized into character. The narcissist arises from the child who was never mirrored. The parent who did not reflect back worth leaves a void. To fill it, the child builds a glittering self-image, demanding admiration. This mask hides fragility. My friend Heinz Kohut described this clearly. Narcissism is the answer to unmet mirroring needs. The Machiavellian arises from the child who trusted and was betrayed. He learns that sincerity brings pain, while cunning brings safety. He becomes the observer of power games, the strategist of social life. Even Niccolo Machiavelli himself, betrayed and exiled, transformed bitterness into political philosophy, where cunning reigned higher than trust. The psychopath arises from the child who felt too much pain. To survive, he turned down the flame of feeling until even guilt and empathy fell silent. My friend Kent Keel showed in his research how the brains of such individuals show weakened activity in the circuits of emotion. But this is not a curse from birth. It is often adaptation to a world without warmth. Yet not all rejection breeds monsters. Some create visionaries. Kafka, Sartre, others who felt alienation turned it into literature and thought. What separates the artist from the manipulator? Often, whether there was at least one supportive bond, one outlet, one refuge. Rejection alone does not decide. The soil around it nourishes or poisons. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, these are not merely labels. They are stories of wounds rewritten as weapons. The child who once cried for inclusion grows into the adult who scoffs at needing anyone. But beneath each mask is the same scar, the memory of being unwanted. Observe closely the mechanism called rejection sensitivity. The child rejected often develops an anxious radar for exclusion. A glance feels like a sneer, a pause like abandonment. My friends Geraldine Downey and Scott Feldman studied this with care. Rejection-sensitive individuals overreact to slights, lash out before they can be hurt, and thereby provoke further rejection. The prophecy fulfills itself. From this cycle, narcissism and manipulation often grow, for they are attempts to preempt rejection. Schopenhauer, whom I count as a comrade in thought, once said, "Almost all of our sorrows spring from our relations with other people." He spoke from experience of alienation, yet he turned it into philosophy, not cruelty. Again, the fork in the road. Some channel rejection into reflection, others into ruthlessness. I must remind you, behind every manipulator is a child once dismissed. Behind every narcissist is a child once invisible. Behind every psychopath is a child once abandoned. To know this is not to excuse but to understand. Personality is memory carved into flesh. And yet, even the darkest traits are not immutable. My friend Carl Jung taught that the greatest problems are not solved but outgrown. The strategies of rejection need not remain prisons. They can be transformed, but only if first seen for what they are. Allow me a pause to speak directly. If these reflections have meaning for you, if you hunger to keep uncovering the hidden forces that shape the human soul, then lend your support. Subscribe, share, allow these words to reach others who search for understanding. Philosophy has always grown not by silence but by conversation. Return now to the architecture of childhood. Erik Erikson described the stages of psychosocial growth: autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt. When rejection pervades these stages, shame replaces autonomy, guilt replaces initiative. The child becomes an adult who doubts his right to exist. Insecure attachments sprout from these roots. The avoidant adult who fears closeness, the anxious adult who clings, both are echoes of early exclusion. And when hardened further, avoidance grows into callousness, clinging into narcissism, calculation into Machiavellianism. Think of Clara, the girl told she was too dramatic. She learns that to be loved she must dazzle, so she demands admiration. This is the path of narcissism. Think of David, the boy mocked for his strangeness. He learns to trade secrets, manipulate alliances, view trust as weakness. This is the path of Machiavellianism. Think of Alex, the child abandoned by all. He numbs his feelings, silences guilt, views others as tools. This is the path of psychopathy. 3 stories, 1 root, rejection. The Danish thinker Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest danger, that of losing oneself, passes quietly as if it were nothing." This is the danger of rejection. The child loses belief in his own worth, and the void fills with armor. So let us reflect. Rejection is not mere sadness. It is primal pain, as old as the tribe, as fierce as exile. Its defenses become traits, its scars become strategies. To see the narcissist, the manipulator, the cold one only as villains is blindness. To see them also as rejected children is clarity. The child grows into the youth, and the wound does not remain still. It stretches, it evolves, it finds new disguises. Adolescence is not only a time of restless blood and awakening desire. It is the crucible where the scars of rejection are tested. In these years, the hunger for belonging intensifies. One seeks not only the embrace of family but also the gaze of peers, the recognition of lovers, the approval of teachers. When belonging is once again withheld, the wound deepens and the defenses become habits. You must understand, the adolescent's greatest question is, who am I? But for the rejected, the hidden question is, do I exist for anyone? Each silence, each dismissal, each cruel laugh can sound like confirmation that the answer is no. From this, the mask thickens. My friend Erik Erikson described these years as the battle between identity and role confusion. The secure adolescent experiments, fails, and tries again. But the rejected one does not experiment freely. He plays for survival. Every gesture is a wager. Will they push me away again? Here we see the flowering of dark traits. Narcissism becomes louder, more visible. The rejected youth may adopt the armor of confidence so dazzling that others believe it is strength. Yet inside lies fragility, a self built upon shifting sand. The applause of peers becomes the drug that calms the pain. Jean Twenge and Keith Campbell traced how admiration feeds this fragile construction. The more empty the core, the more ravenous the hunger for validation. Machiavellianism becomes sharper. The rejected youth learns to read social hierarchies with uncanny skill. He notices who commands influence, who hides secrets, who can be flattered. He begins to trade in manipulation, not because he delights in cruelty, but because it feels safer than trust. Studies in youth psychology show that such adolescents often achieve influence, even fear, among their peers. It is survival dressed as strategy. Psychopathy emerges in its earliest form through callous unemotional traits. These young ones have grown tired of being burned by feeling. They numb themselves. They take risks without thought for others. My friend Paul Frick observed this pattern and showed that, though alarming, it is not always permanent. A single bond of care, a mentor who refuses to reject, can still turn the current. Yet if none appear, the numbness calcifies. Do not imagine that society is innocent in this drama. Schools reward the bold mask, not the fragile truth. Peer groups reward manipulation with status, coldness with intrigue. The very traits born from rejection are applauded in adolescence. For a time, the narcissist seems charismatic, the Machiavellian clever, the cold one fearless. Yet these rewards are like coins of lead, heavy to carry, worthless in the end. Think of Maria, who at 15 turned her loneliness into a polished image on the glowing screen. Online she gathered likes, offline she remained invisible. Over time the mask consumed the face. Think of Jamal, who studied the power games of his classmates until he became the unseen strategist. He was not popular, but he was feared. Think of Tyler, whose abandonment was so total that he laughed when others cried. Teachers called him cold, but he was only numb. Each of these is the adolescent form of the dark triad, shaped not by choice alone, but by the long shadow of rejection. Some may ask, if rejection breeds such darkness, why do some rejected youths become poets, reformers, visionaries? The answer is that pain is a forge that can harden steel or sharpen light. My friend Viktor Frankl, who endured unspeakable rejection in the camps, declared that when we cannot change the situation, we must change ourselves. The rejected youth who discovers art, philosophy, or faith may turn the wound into creation, but the one who finds only hostility turns it into calculation. Relationships in these years bear witness to the wound most clearly. The narcissistic youth seeks romance not for intimacy but for proof. Am I admired? The Machiavellian youth enters partnerships as bargains. What advantage does this bring me? The callous youth treats others as objects, not persons. Love, which could heal, often becomes another arena of rejection. Jean-Paul Sartre once said that man is condemned to be free. For the rejected adolescent, this freedom often feels like exile. He is free, yes, but free to wander alone. And yet let us not ignore the paradox. These dark traits, though born of pain, can bring short-term triumphs. The narcissist attracts attention, the manipulator builds influence, the cold one dares risks others' fear. Society mistakes these traits for strength. Teachers admire confidence, peers follow cunning, crowds applaud recklessness. But in truth, these are fragile victories, for beneath them the wound grows deeper. My friend Carl Rogers offered a paradox of his own. When I accept myself as I am, then I can change. But the rejected adolescent rarely hears acceptance. He hears only confirmation of his unworthiness. And so the mask grows thicker. Let us widen the lens once more. What happens when many rejected children grow into youths who wear these masks? A culture emerges where manipulation, vanity, and coldness are rewarded. Politics becomes theater of ego. Classrooms become games of dominance. Friendships become contracts. And the true longing for connection lies buried beneath layers of suspicion. Niccolo Machiavelli himself knew rejection deeply. Exiled, imprisoned, betrayed, he turned his bitterness into counsel for rulers. He declared that it is safer to be feared than loved. Imagine thousands of young minds silently learning the same lesson through their own exclusions. They carry this lesson into every bond, and thus the cycle repeats. Still, the story is not only despair. Interventions exist. A teacher who sees beyond the mask, a mentor who refuses to abandon, a community that offers belonging. These can soften the scar. Studies on mentoring programs show that a single adult who offers consistent acceptance can alter the trajectory of a rejected child. But the truth remains, not all find such refuge. Many carry the mask into adulthood. Reflect with me. Every toxic partner, every manipulative friend, every domineering colleague was once a youth standing alone, rehearsing defenses. They did not wake one day as monsters. They practiced, year after year, until the defense became the only self they knew. I once warned, beware that in fighting monsters you do not become one yourself. The rejected youth, fighting the monster of exclusion, often becomes the very figure he despised, unless, somewhere, someone interrupts the cycle. So here is where we pause our reflection. Adolescence magnifies the scar of early rejection. Narcissism grows as dazzling armor. Machiavellianism sharpens as cunning strategy. Psychopathy whispers through the quiet numbness of pain. Society, blind to the wound, often rewards the mask. But the wound does not end here, for the adolescent becomes the adult who steps into work, into love, into leadership, and there the mask reveals its greatest consequences. The adolescent does not remain in the schoolyard forever. He steps into the world of adults, where the stage is larger, the stakes higher, and the masks worn more convincingly. Yet the wound of rejection does not vanish at the threshold of maturity. It matures as well, hardening into identities that shape careers, marriages, and the fate of communities. Let us walk into the realm of work. The modern office, the court, the marketplace, they are arenas where belonging is measured by performance. Here the masks of the rejected often prove effective. The narcissist dazzles interviewers with charm and confidence. The Machiavellian maneuvers through politics with precision. The The callous one embraces risks others shrink from, and society, often blind to origins, rewards these masks with promotion, power, and applause. My friend Delray Paulhus and his colleague Kevin Williams revealed this through their research. Those who score high on what they called the dark triad often rise faster in organizations, not because they serve better, but because they present stronger. They project certainty where others doubt, strategy where others hesitate. But beneath the mask remains the same rejected child, now cloaked in authority. The consequences are profound. The narcissistic leader builds a culture where flattery matters more than truth. The Machiavellian manager corrodes trust, turning colleagues into rivals. The callous executive gambles recklessly with the lives of employees. These are not merely personal flaws, they are the echo of early rejection amplified by power. My friend Hannah Arendt spoke of the banality of evil, that much destruction arises not from monstrous intent but from ordinary actions of individuals who stop seeing others as persons. So too with these leaders. They no longer see people but pawns, no longer hear voices but applause. It is rejection's shadow cast across entire institutions. Consider love in adulthood. If adolescence magnified the wound, adulthood engraves it into intimacy. The narcissistic partner enters romance not for communion but for constant validation. The beloved becomes a mirror, expected to reflect admiration endlessly. When conflict arises, it is interpreted not as a difference to be resolved but as a threat to fragile selfhood. The partner walks on eggshells, feeding an appetite that never ends. Beneath it all is the same cry of the unseen child. The Machiavellian lover treats intimacy as negotiation. Affection is given when useful, withdrawn when costly. Trust is rationed. Secrets are currency. The beloved feels less like a companion, more like a piece on a board. Again, beneath it lies the child who once learned that trust leads only to betrayal. The callous partner may seduce with danger, thrill with recklessness, charm with boldness. But when the moment passes, empathy does not appear. Cruelty erupts, abandonment follows. It is not passion, it is numbness disguised as freedom. Thus, love, which could have healed, often becomes another theater of rejection. Still, not all who bear these scars remain destructive. The trait is not destiny, it is possibility. The narcissist who recognizes his hunger for admiration may turn it into art or performance that uplifts others. The strategist may turn cunning into diplomacy, the thrill seeker into entrepreneurship. The wound remains, but it is harnessed rather than unleashed. Here I recall the words of my friend Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The rejected adult who refuses reflection repeats his wound endlessly, but the one who dares to face it may transform. Let us step back and see the larger canvas. When countless rejected children grow into adults who lead, govern, and create, their wounds shape society itself. Politics becomes theater for the ego. Leaders crave applause, not justice. Manipulation becomes standard, not exception. Ruthlessness masquerades as strength. History shows us rulers whose early humiliations fueled endless quests for control, nations bent under the weight of one person's unhealed wound. Plato warned that when rulers are unexamined, the state itself becomes diseased. Today's psychology explains why. Unhealed rejection at the top seeps downward, shaping laws, economies, and cultures. Yet I must also tell you of the other path. For some, rejection becomes the fire that tempers rather than destroys. Oprah Winfrey's early life was marked by exclusion and abuse, yet she transformed it into empathy that touched millions. Malcolm X's childhood rejections led him first into crime, then into vision, using charisma and strategy to awaken instead of exploit. These are not fairy tales, but examples of what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. My friends Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun studied how suffering can lead to deeper appreciation of life, stronger relationships, greater resilience. The wound does not vanish, it becomes light. But let us not be naive. For everyone who transforms, many more remain trapped. The cycle of rejection repeats in their marriages, in their workplaces, in how they raise their children. Unless interrupted, rejection begets rejection. So the question becomes, how do we break the cycle? First comes recognition. One must admit that the mask is not strength but defense. To demand admiration, to manipulate, to numb feeling, these are strategies of survival, not signs of superiority. This realization is painful, for it strips away illusion, but without it, there is no path forward. Second comes compassion, not only from others but from oneself. My friend Kristen Neff has shown that self-compassion reduces shame and builds resilience. The rejected adult must learn to tell himself, I am worthy without the applause, without the game, without the armor. Third comes connection, not shallow ties but genuine bonds where vulnerability meets acceptance. This can be therapy, friendship, community, faith, any place where rejection does not repeat. My friend Martin Buber described true encounters as I-thou, not I-it. The dark traits reduce others to it. Healing requires rediscovering the thou. Is it too late for the adult scarred by rejection? No, personality is not stone, it is clay. It reshapes slowly, painfully, but it reshapes. Cognitive therapy, mindfulness, confession, honest dialogue, all these offer roads. Parenthood often forces the confrontation. Many who were rejected vow never to repeat it, choosing to break the cycle by offering their children unconditional acceptance. The poet Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Rejection is such a wound. It can remain dark or it can open to light. Yet responsibility does not rest only on the rejected. It rests on us all. Every time a child is excluded on the playground, every time a teenager is mocked online, every time an adult is dismissed in silence, rejection plants seeds, and those seeds grow. What seeds do you plant? Do you create inclusion or exclusion? Do you notice the one who sits alone, the colleague unheard, the neighbor unseen? The dark traits we fear in others are reflections of the neglect we allow in ourselves. Aristotle reminded us that man is by nature a social animal. To reject is to wound that nature. To include is to heal it. This choice belongs not only to individuals but to societies. Now the journey draws to its close. Let me gather the threads. Rejection in childhood cuts as deep as exile. In adolescence, the wound magnifies, the masks harden. In adulthood, the masks walk into love, work, and power, shaping not only lives but nations. And yet transformation is possible. The mask can be removed, the scar can be softened, the cycle can be broken. If you have felt rejection, remember, the pain is real, but the mask is not the only answer. You can choose to heal, to connect, to feel again. And if you see another carrying these traits, remember, behind the mask is often a child still waiting to be seen. As Carl Rogers told us, what I am is good enough if I would only be it openly. Perhaps the antidote to darkness is not more armor but radical acceptance, the very thing denied at the start. Before I let these words rest, let me ask you, if you have found meaning in this reflection, let it not end with you. Share it, subscribe to the ongoing dialogue, allow these ideas to ripple further. For philosophy has never been about one voice alone, but about the conversation of many. The greatest strength is not in building thicker walls, but in daring to live without them.